All right, what's up, guys? Um, as always, I want to jump right into it. What we're looking at today, uh, the whole idea, the whole point to what we're talking about is introductions. Everything we've worked on up to this point, I've really been aiming at two things. Number one, just to get you guys thinking about the movie along the lines that we're meant to think about it, i.e., rhetorical analysis. I've had a couple of you ask me about that, over the past week or so. Um, it is my hope that, because again, we're all coming with different levels of experience to this. It's my hope that here in the past couple classes, at the very least, we've addressed some of those concerns, some of those confusions, because at this point, I really want to try to start building these papers. So what we're looking at today, what's on the screen right now, is also posted to Courseden. I'm using my memory. Oh, actually, here I can. What's it titled? That's the title on Courseden. Okay, so you want to pull that up, um, and actually, I'll go ahead. It's gonna feel a little long, like it's gonna look long when you look at it, but it's not. So take, you know, 3, 4, 5 minutes, pause the video, go read that because everything we do after this point is going to depend upon you having read this document. So go for it. I hope that you did that. As always, I'm kind of speaking into nothingness here. We're all in the honor system. I will say, again, as always, if you don't read this document, I don't think you'll get as much out of this lesson, but that's up to you. All right. So, why did I have you read this? Well, first of all, this is student work. This is one of your classmates' close reading assignments that they submitted. And the thing I like about these early assignments, again, I leave them a little bit open ended because I want to see one, sort of what you guys are capable of on an individual level, but two, I like to just leave it open to see what you can come up with, right? In this particular case, and some students will take the assignment like this student has kind of, the best way I can think to describe it, they've written us a rough draft, right? What we basically have are three very early body paragraphs, which is cool, you know? Um, Again, not everybody did that, so I know some of you are out there freaking out right now, like, I didn't take it that way. That's fine. That's totally fine. All of this is meant to just kind of get us going. And again, I call it a rough draft. So even this student, in some ways, they're kind of further along than others in terms of their development for their paper. This still has all kinds of work they could do to it. So it's far from perfect, right? But they are doing some good things, and we're going to use it as a result of that. Also, step two in this process, now that we got all that out of the way, hopefully you've read the thing. I want you to go back here, just take a couple more minutes. You can skim now because ideally you've read the document. Um, each one of these paragraphs, there's only three. To the best of your ability, I want you to do a thing for me, but I'm going to explain what it is first. What we're going to need to do if we're going to build an introduction for like if we're pretending this is our paper that we're looking at and these are the three body paragraphs that we're going to use, um, we need to introduce all the ideas that are in these paragraphs as part of our introduction. In an effort to do that, first of all, I want to be very clear. Our primary objective in all the papers we write, including this one, is argument. An argument is something that needs to be proven. Okay? So, for instance, in this first paragraph, I'm going to go ahead and say they probably have a little too much summary, which again, rough draft, totally fine. They're just kind of figuring it out. But where does it stop? Right here, I think. Yeah, pretty much all of this is summary, right? If you go back and read this, it's all from the movie. A lot of it's really good because we can dig into it. But my point is, this is straight up from the film, so it's not argument, right? It doesn't require proof. Like if somebody watched this part of the movie and told you some of this, you would just kind of nod. You'd be like, yeah, that does happen. The rest of it, for the most part, is argument, right? Well, I went a little too, sorry, maybe right here. The rest of it is argument. These are things that are obviously related to the summary up here, but they require proof, they require explanation. In some cases, you might have to be convinced using evidence. That's argument. That's what we're after. And I say all that to say this. What I want you to do now, step 2, again with that other document that you hopefully have up, skim over these paragraphs. I mean, read them if you have to, but to the best of your ability, 1 to 2 sentences per paragraph. So you're going to have 3 to 6 sentences when you're done. I want you to try to sum up what you think the argument is in each one of these paragraphs. What's the main idea? What are they trying to convince you of about the movie? Anything like that. So again, pause the video here, take a moment, go ahead and do that. As always, I hope that you did that. I know some of you are sitting out there not doing it. It really bums me out. Anyway, okay. So I did that work as well on my own. Hopefully, we came up with some similar results. Of course, there can be differences of opinion. Let me get this. I should have had this open to begin with. I do apologize. All right. Oh, and that's not right either. Please. Okay. All right. So before we can use what we just came up with, a quick sidebar. Talking about introductions generally, we already spoke about the 3 I's. That's what you use for body paragraph construction. And that relates to topic sentence, evidence, analysis. That's how each one of your body paragraphs, when we get to the final product, needs to be built. Introductions are a little bit different. Many of you are going to be familiar with some of these structures. That's because introductions are roundabout always built in the same kind of way. I will say, as always, I may use certain language that teachers before me have not used. They may have called it something different. But again, I promise you, all these introductions are built in the same way. So anyway, the first element, and again, many of you will know this one, a hook. I always put a question mark because a hook is optional. You guys tend to love them, so go ahead and do it if you want. But I like to stress that you don't have to. I think sometimes students can get bogged down at the hook, which is really unfortunate because that's the first sentence. Some people really want to like make it great, knock it out of the park, whatever. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself at the very beginning of a paper. So yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to have one. All that said, what is a hook? Um, it's meant to, it's right there in the name, kind of hook the reader, interest the reader, get somebody wanting to read the rest of your paper. Even at that, I like to remind students, um, this doesn't mean, because sometimes you guys have a really sort of elevated definition of what interesting means. You're you're really just kind of going for like a moment, you know? Um, and these can be different mechanisms. So one that you'll see a lot, rhetorical question. A rhetorical question, by the way, is a question that does not require an answer. My favorite example that I like to give students: if your mother has ever said this, "Did I ask for your opinion?" What are you supposed to say to that? You're not supposed to say anything, right? But that's not what she said. She just asked for your opinion, right? No, no, that's a rhetorical question. She is communicating, shut up. But she never said that, right? Rhetorical question sort of puts a thought into your head without the speaker having ever actually verbalized that thought. And as such, it does not require an answer. Of course, you're probably not going to use that particular rhetorical question at the top of your paper, but that's how those tend to work. So you don't want like a yes no question. You don't want something that the reader can actually answer because they'll stop reading. Okay, other mechanisms you can use: an interesting fact, an anecdote, a quotation that somehow relates to the text. These are harder to do, especially in a paper of the length that we're writing. 2 to 3 pages, something like an anecdote, I mean, that's going to take sentences to do, right? A short story is what an anecdote is. You just don't have that kind of room in a paper like this. So all that is to say, if you decide to go with a hook, I would just remind you it needs to be very, very quick. We're talking like 2 sentences, 3 absolutely tops. You just don't have the space to spend time doing that, okay? But if you want to give it a shot, by all means, go for it. All right. These next 3 are not optional. You have to do these, all right? Number 2, intro the text. Um, a lot of people take this one for granted, but I always like to remind students to do it. What does it mean? You introduce the text that we're studying, you know? Um, the filmmaker's name just escaped me. Oh no, that's embarrassing. Wait, is it in the other document? I think it is. Oh no. Oh no. I'm not gonna be able to summon it. Anyway, in the filmmaker's, whatever that guy's name is, The Social Dilemma. That's all you gotta do to introduce a text. Author, title, and then a shortish summary, a quick summary. So in whatever that guy's name is, The Social Dilemma, um, we meet many experts from the field who talk about sort of the addictive qualities of social media and phones and how they feel like it's fundamentally corrupting our society. You know, something like that. That's one sentence, kind of long, but that's one sentence that really sums up the movie. Here again, for the introduction to the text, 1 to 2 sentences. You don't want to spend a lot of time doing this, but you do want to do it. I will tell you this from experience. Every semester, I have maybe, only 1 or 2 students who fall into this trap, but they never introduce the text. If you never introduce the text, what happens is you never write about it. You might write about ideas that are related to the text, but you don't write about the text. And I'm telling you now, that does not go well. Okay? So, right from the top, whether or not you have a hook, introduce that text to us. It kind of it lets me know as a reader what I'm gonna be hearing about, but it also forces you as a writer to start talking about it. So do it right up there at the top. All right, from here we have 2 more items, and I'm gonna kind of talk about them together. All right, I feel like many of you, again, in varying degrees, know what a thesis is. It's the argument that of your paper, of your entire paper. It's meant to guide the whole paper, right? Thesis statement, not sentence. So again, it can be a sentence, but more often it's like 2 sentences, maybe 3. In a paper like this, 2 feels like a pretty good length. Anyway, I like to underscore that it needs to be an argument, right? It needs to be something that requires proof. Oftentimes you guys can fall into the trap where you're kind of really just summarizing the movie, or you're talking about like themes that are present in the movie. That's not an argument. Um, it could be the beginning of an argument, but that's not an argument. Um, the other thing I'll say, because a thesis is somewhat brief, right? Say it's 2 sentences. Say your thesis statement is 2 sentences long. If it's meant to, in some way, guide your entire paper, kind of sum up the argument from your entire paper, out of necessity, your thesis is going to be a bit broad, a bit vague, right? Like that's just how that works. That's why the roadmap is vitally important. A lot of you, especially on this first paper, will forget to give me the roadmap, and I'm telling you now, it is important. What the hell is it? The roadmap does 2 things. Number one, due to the sort of vague general nature of your thesis, your roadmap is going to be longer. It's going to be, I don't know, anywhere from like 3 to 6 sentences, something like that. And it's going to break down for me in detail what I'm going to see in your thesis. So another way to think about this is your thesis is going to lay out all these ideas again in these kind of general terms. Your roadmap is going to actually walk me through how some of those ideas work before I get to the thesis, right? Um, so that when I get there, I'm not surprised. So that when I get there, I understand what you're talking about, right? The other thing a roadmap can do, if your thesis, again, is meant to sum up your entire paper, and your roadmap breaks down how your thesis works, well, then logic would follow that your roadmap also kind of breaks down what I'm going to see throughout your paper. Again, that's why I had you break down the paragraphs we looked at here. Um, we're gonna build a little bit of roadmap here in a couple minutes, and we're gonna use the notes that I took that are hopefully fairly similar to the notes you took to build that roadmap. Walk us through what we're gonna see in the paper. It is called an introduction for a reason, right? Okay. So all that said, Let me make this a little bigger. All right. All that said, oh, look at me getting cocky. There we go. Let's try to write an introduction. And actually, hang on one second. Sorry about this. Okay. What kind of hook would we want? Let's try a rhetorical question. Let's try like, um, I'm not in love with that. Um, we could do more work on that, but that's not a bad idea, right? I think a lot of us, anyway, have gone through that moment where we've been without our phone for maybe 5 minutes, and you kind of go into this weird panic mode. That, in and of itself, I think the people that made the documentary would say, yeah, that's probably a problem, right? You should be able to be without a thing for a couple minutes. Anyway, I want to move past the hook, but that's like kind of a blah example. The other thing we need to do, because I'm not going to trust my memory on this. Who made this thing? Where's the... Wait, where does it... What the... That guy. Ah, see, that's what I couldn't summon. Orlowski. Okay. In Jeff Orlowski's... I didn't do that right either. That doesn't... Okay. In Jeff Orlowski's The Social Dilemma, we've italicized the title of the documentary there. What? I know I summed it up earlier, but again, I don't trust my own memory. What was it like? Um, we hear from many experts who don't know why I can't type today. Okay. I feel like that's a really solid summary. I mean, I'm not one to pat myself on the back, I don't think. Like, I don't mind that. That's not bad. Okay. So all of this, to this point, I am super confident you guys can knock out. Will you do it how I just did it? No, because we're different people. But hook, if you want one, see, super quick. We don't spend time there. We immediately get into the text. In this guy's movie, this happens. And all that is summary. Anybody who watched the film, you could show them that sentence. They would not disagree with you because it's summary. All right. From here on, though, we're going to need those notes that I'm hoping against hope you have when it comes to these paragraphs, right? We have 3 of these things. And all we want to do in the roadmap, which is what we're starting here, is our best to introduce the ideas, the arguments contained within those paragraphs. So let's kind of go through them very quickly. In this first paragraph, which maybe I can fit on the screen if I do it this way. Well, I can't quite. But anyway, again, you have that other document, hopefully, that you can refer to if you need to as we talk about it. All right. I already mentioned in this paragraph, there's a good bit of summary, probably too much. All that means is, again, this is a rough draft. As they edit this thing and tweak it, they want to really think about what they need. They brought all this up because they knew they wanted to talk about it, right? But they didn't quite know what elements they wanted to focus on. So the trick there would be you go down here to the analysis and you just kind of figure out, well, what am I really referencing up here, which is to say, what could I lose because I don't use it? And also, what that would do is allow for expansion. So, first of all, the main idea I got here, the student is really focused on relatability, like being able to relate to the text, and emotional appeals. So, she cites, for instance, that all of us have kind of gone through something like this at some point in our lives, which is to say, Isla has to deal with a jerk online. In some ways, I think that is the internet, unfortunately. Um, so we can relate to that, right? But also, I want to find it here. Um, she talks about Isla is sad and self conscious, and she spends a lot of time talking about how we can relate to it. But I think she kind of implies. Oh, right here, she says we can sympathize with her. That to me is the student also trying to cite the fact that this is an emotional appeal. Which I'll put it to you this way: it's not just that we can relate to the documentary here. That is important. That's worth talking about. We could possibly talk about it more here. But also, not everyone is going to relate to everything, right? Because again, we're all different. We have different lived experiences, what have you. But when you see a young girl, I mean, again, I would think she's like 12, 13, something like that, middle school age, um, which is a very hard age, right, to live through um, because of all those people you have to deal with. When you see her uh, face in that scene and obviously how she's feeling about herself and through no fault of her own, right? Like it's awful. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is we could talk about the fact that you can relate to kind of what she's dealing with, and we're doing that here. But you could go a step further and say, beyond just relating, sympathize is how she says it here, but you can feel for her, right? As a human being, as a young girl having to kind of face all this BS from these people. Um, that's a really strong rhetorical appeal too, and it's related, pardon the pun, to relatability, but it's not the same thing. So I think we could talk about both, and we only just kind of mention it here right at the end. So how do we bring any of that up in our introduction? The first, there's a couple different ways to do it, but I'm going to give you like in general a really, I think, sort of easy approach. If you bring up the aspect of the text that you're interested in, okay? So in this case, and she spelled it like this. That's probably correct actually. I should have looked up how they spell it. I've also seen it spelled this way, but I like what this student did actually, so I'm going to steal that. All right. So as far as these are harmful, um, what? Um, Faux, by the way, that just means fake. Because again, they couldn't use Instagram in the movie without probably having to pay a whole bunch of money. So again, this is summary. None of that is argument, right? Now we're going to make an argument. Um, we could do that quicker. I'm already screwing up. Sorry. All right. What are we trying to name about her? Is able to relate to her, I guess, reaction, experience, both. To her. The audience would relate to her experience with online trolls as well. sympathize with, gonna borrow the student's language there, as well as sympathize with her obvious, the word I keep coming to is heart. I mean, she's not heartbroken, but um, their obvious struggle. Yeah, that's good enough. All right, so I like to keep score for you guys. What have we done? This is one piece of our roadmap. They won't always be this long. They won't always be 2 sentences, what have you. But in this case, and maybe it's reflective of the paragraph they gave to us, right? Because so much of their paragraph is the scene itself. I felt like I had to set the whole scene kind of in that first sentence, okay? But in the second sentence, the whole second sentence, this is our analysis, this is our argument in that paragraph. Now, another point I want to make to you really quickly. Again, this is a rough draft, okay? So not only will they hopefully trim some of this summary because it's a lot, but they will probably, hopefully, develop this analysis further. What that's going to mean is our analysis, sometimes there's just more of it, okay? But other times it'll change. You'll arrive at a slightly different idea. In that case, you know, you got to go back to what you've done in your introduction. You got to make those changes too. Anyway, all right. Second paragraph. Oh, and of course it's split on the page here. Anyway, what do we got going on? This paragraph, in terms of its argument, and actually in terms of its structure, very different. You'll notice um, way less summary. I mean, in this case, I almost wonder if they could have a little more, right? Um, uh, I mean, it's pretty good, but it's damn fast, and they have it in one more spot, one more piece of evidence. But it's wild to me how much different it is from the one above. Anyway, we're talking about this PhD guy, and we immediately leap to credibility, right? Which is fair. This guy has all kinds of degrees. He went to school for a really long time. It sounds like he studied this stuff extensively. Um, and absolutely, you would have to think about this guy seems pretty damn credible, right? As a resource. Um, Now, all that said, I definitely think there's a couple missed opportunities here, which is to say, well, let's start with what they gave us, okay? Let's do this. Did we say what kind of psychologist he was? Social psychologist. Thanks, Google. We also hear from a social psychologist who right? That's what he mainly talks about, I think. Yeah. Okay. So we also hear from this guy. We've much like we do in our paragraph, cited kind of who he is, and in the second part, which I'm struggling with, we talk about what he's talking about. All right, so that's a summary too, which is fine. That means our next sentence needs to be, what are we talking about for our argument? What's our idea? Which is to say, it's not summary. Sorry, I am trying to move the mic when I do that. Okay. Again, we immediately, rightfully, leap to credibility. And I kind of feel like we should get this guy's name, if I'm being honest. I'm not going to go looking for it on this video due to, we'll just say, that person's um, credentials. right? That's pretty good. I can live with that. Um, the other thing I want to point out, um, and you may or may not always have to do this, but I like to point out where you have other possibilities, okay? We mentioned credibility, justifiably so, and we kind of double down on that. We start talking about statistics and how, again, I think I pointed this out in an earlier video. It's true if you stop and think about it. Like when you encounter statistics just out in the world, how many of us double check those statistics? How many of us say, I don't know, and then we do a little bit of our own research? Almost never, right? If something has a percentage symbol after it, you're like, that must be the exact truth of the world we live in. There's no way that could be in any way wrong. Like statistics, for some reason, we just always assume are official. I think it might come down to the fact that math is involved, and that doesn't scare maybe all of you the way it does me, but it's just numbers, man. Numbers for some reason, like we just assume are solvable and fixable and a done thing. So there's no room for debate when statistics are involved, right? Like that's kind of how they work. And we talk about that a little bit in this paragraph because it's alongside this psychologist, so we're further interested in credibility. The one point I want to make, the scene the student is talking about, if you remember, this guy is talking about a pretty rough topic, um, teenage girl suicide and preteen uh, girl suicide, which is like yikes. Um, but if you remember to that scene, it's not just him talking. It's not just statistics. They have a line graph, right? And again, his big point is a lot of this correlates to sort of when social media really got going. That's when these numbers shot way up. That may be worth pointing out as well, actually, because if you're going to talk about credibility, you want to mention what that credibility gets applied to, right? But also, what is that line graph made of? It's shoestrings, right? From like tennis shoes. I think one line's pink, one line's purple. Uh, Obviously, because we associate those colors with more of a feminine connotation. But I don't know. I mean, again, this could be. Sorry, I did that into the mic. This could be the sort of thing. Maybe it just hits me a little harder because I'm not you guys, right? But something about those shoestrings to me, it's like, what does a young girl kind of have in the world, right? It's not just the colors basically that represent them. Like what do you really own, or what do you care about, or what can you control when you're a little girl? Not much. But your shoestrings are like this little part of the world that we take very much for granted. How often do you think about shoestrings? Um, but it's this thing that like these little girls that are going through this really awful stuff um, are probably a little closer to. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just this little aspect of the lives of these young girls that they use to illustrate these graphs, right? And that to me, again, like it's credibility, but I would argue also mixed with uh, another really strong, really subtle, perhaps emotional appeal. Um, and again, all that is to say, they may have enough here to just talk about credibility. I am more than fine with that. Okay, but I just want you to recognize in pretty much all of these scenes, there's there's always more options on the table. Okay. But anyway, where were we? So we talked about that guy due to his credentials. You would want to go find that in the movie. Extensive expertise. It's obvious was working to bolster the credibility of their argument here. Um, use his name again. One we're in this guy. All right, 2 out of 3. Last paragraph here. What are we looking at? Oh, this is really smart. I don't know if they meant to do this, like if they thought about it consciously, but I like this. The scene they're talking about, all of this, by the way, is like maybe 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. We start with Isla on her phone. We cut to the psychologist, kind of talking about stuff that's related to Isla, and then we move to Isla at the end in her bathroom. She doesn't even have her phone. I don't think. Well, it's probably in there. I'm just not thinking of it. But the point is, that's not the focus of the scene. The focus is Isla. She's looking in the mirror. She's obviously dealing with still the emotions that she's feeling as a result of that jerk talking about her ears. And again, what evidence are we really focused on in the paragraph? First of all, whoever the actress is, this young girl like playing Isla, crushes this scene because it is awful, right? Um, but yeah, she touches her ears and she's like obviously trying not to just start sobbing here. Um, so clearly, we're talking about an emotional appeal, which they bring up, of course, but also, and they kind of imply this, but I don't think the language is as blatant as it could be. I think what we're trying to kind of get at here in this last paragraph is the end of this scene is nice because it's not just another emotional appeal, right? It's more than that. It's suggesting that all the stuff we were just talking about in these previous paragraphs transcends the boundary between sort of the phone world and the real world. What I mean is, she was interacting with that person online, or really that person interacted with her. It's not like she went out and sought that D bag out, right? But this person said this awful thing to her, and she's dealing with it, but she takes that with her, right? It's kind of in her head now. She doesn't even need the phone to kind of look at herself in the mirror and start worrying about it, thinking about ways to try to fix herself, right? Maybe hide her ears, like all this stuff. Um, so we basically we take that emotional appeal, but we add to the argument, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. And again, I think that's implied in this paragraph, but I don't know that it's said outright in that way. So, oh, sorry. So let's talk about that here. Further, I'm already not sure how I want to. Further, um, oh Jesus Christ. All right. So apart from simply another emotional appeal, because I mean, yeah, this is that. Okay. Um, ooh, I just said further. I can't say it again. Uh, oh, that's cool. All right. Hey guys, I don't know what that's about. That's fun. Let's try this again. I just got signed out for no reason. Fun. Please. Please. Guys, the universe is out to get me. That's all this is. Oh my god, do I have to reload every page? Is that what's going on? Okay, all right. Back in the game. Apart from simply another emotional appeal, seeing, we could just say, here we go. Broadens all right. Again, I'm not super in love with everything we've done here, but it's not bad. So what do we have? Again, we have a hook. We have our introduction of the text, which is just that long. Everything after that. And is it a little long? Probably. But I'd rather this section were a little long than a little short, if I'm being honest with you. All of this is our roadmap. And again, all we've done, sorry about that, all we've done is walked through our paper. Each paragraph, in this case, there's 3, okay? That's it. It's not super complicated. And again, we've primarily focused on our arguments in those paragraphs. We could tighten some of this up, which is to say we almost certainly don't need 2 sentences per paragraph. We could probably combine some of these 2-sentence sections into 1 sentence. I'll leave that for another day. The point is, we've done what we needed to do here. Now, we would have to think about a thesis. The best way I know to do that, honestly, if you work your roadmap enough and you get it to a place where you feel like it's pretty representative of your paper, the content therein, now you can just kind of read your roadmap and do your best to sum that up, because that's really all your thesis needs to be. So what do we end up talking about here? I'm going to read it so you can go ahead and read it too. Let's see. Okay. It seems like, I mean, again, all of this really is centered around Isla. Okay. So we're going to have to bring her up. Let's start there. Able to what? Several claims about the damage through emotional appeals, the credibility of medical experts, and I feel like there's one more missing that just left my brain. What was the other one? Emotional appeals, credibility, and I know there was one more. What was it? Oh, and the fact that unfortunately all of us in some shape or form can relate to this garbage too, right? Through emotional appeals, credibility, medical experts, and the unfortunate fact that I cannot type. Okay. And the unfortunate fact Environment was better. Google knew. Okay. That's an introduction. That's an introduction. Again, is it probably long? Yeah. Uh, Everything is actually really solid. The issue here, and again, this is what drafting is for. The issue is that our roadmap is probably a little long. The trick would be now, uh, in like a next draft, as you edit, you would look for a way to trim this guy down a little bit. Probably cut it down by a third or so, right? But still, that's outstanding. This is everything we need in terms of the pieces. And you'll notice, and this will be true for all of you if you do your job, your roadmap's going to be your longest section. It just is, okay? Hook is rather short. Introduction to the text is absolutely necessary, but also rather short. Roadmap is where you start explaining to me what your arguments are and how they work. So that's important, right? And that way, when we get to the thesis, again, notice I said it would be fairly general, fairly vague when we got there. Emotional appeals, credibility, people are jerks. I kind of understand all that, but like his emotional appeals, I don't know. I don't know what that's referencing. That's why the roadmap is necessary. Okay. This is how you approach the beginning of your papers, all of them, every single paper you write. All right. The only thing I want to remind you what we got coming up. We have introductions due for next time. So this video is super topical. Apart from that, Turnitin. I don't remember if I mentioned this in the previous video, but I'll remind you here if in case I said it before. Turnitin.com. You go to that website, you sign up for an account. Some of you may have one already. Some of you may have one already and not realize it. I don't know who's out there giving people Turnitin accounts. Like I don't get it. But occasionally people will have trouble, and it'll be something like you'll go to set up an account, and it'll say that you already have one. Basically, instead of freaking out, all you need to do is click forgot password and use the email you were trying to sign up with, and they will email you a link and you can reset your password, and all of a sudden it's your account, so you're good. Anyway, you set up an account, you go to the email I sent this past weekend with the class ID and the password. You use those two pieces of information and you can sign up for our class. That's how you'll submit rough drafts, final drafts. Yeah, that's really it. And those assignments are coming up, so we want to go ahead and get signed up for Turnitin and get all that out of the way. Anyway, work on your introductions. Ideally, by the end of this week, we should all, even in the worst case scenario, kind of be really writing our papers. That's my hope anyway. Other than that, I hope everyone's well, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.